Hey Commander players, it's EK, your EDH edutainer, and this week we're taking a look at a deck built around something very special. Everyone has those build around cards that they want to brew around but just can't seem to make them work, or you end up cutting them by the time the deck is finished. And this week's deck is built around that card for me. With that being said, what build around card have you been trying to make work or end up cutting while deck building? Sound off in the comments section below and let me know. You might see it pop up in a future video. Anyways, let's get into it. So my White Whale build around is Hunting Grounds. This card is always one that I've desperately tried to make work, but at the end of the day, it always ends up feeling half-baked and I end up cutting it. It's a type of card that you really have to commit to, but it suffers from ending up in too busy of a deck. Until now. Hunting Grounds is a green and a white for an enchantment that says Threshold. As long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, Hunting Grounds has, whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this card is a green-white graveyard card, and that's certainly out of the ordinary. This card could definitely be compared to Lurking Predators in that something good happens when an opponent casts a spell. However, where Lurking Predators wants us manipulating the top of our deck, Hunting Grounds wants us manipulating our hand and drawing cards to put them into play. And the important thing to note here is we're not casting the cards. So the different Eldrazi cards like Emrakul, Promise End aren't going to work here because we're not casting them. We don't get their effect. However, we still get to take advantage of end of the battlefield effects. So because Hunting Grounds wants us to care about the graveyard just enough to get it active, we definitely need to be in the colors to support that kind of consistency. Saskia the Unyielding is not only going to give us the colors we need to effectively support Hunting Grounds, she's going to give us an artificial damage doubler in the command zone as well. Saskia is white, black, red, green for a 3/4 human soldier. As she enters the battlefield, choose a player. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. She's a pretty classic commander that has seen a huge variety of fan-favorite builds or not-so-fan-favorite builds over the years. However, Hunting Grounds is going to be the perfect wrench to throw into things to make for a deck that's very unique and very fun to play. So where do we start? We're built around Hunting Grounds, and like I said, we have to commit to building around Hunting Grounds. So we have to make sure that Hunting Grounds can get into play consistently, and we've got to meet the requirements for Threshold. In terms of instants and sorceries, Cathartic Pyre, Thrilling Discovery, and Faithless Looting are going to get our card cycling online in a big way, while we fill our graveyard quite quickly. Nyxweaver and Underrealm Lich are two fantastic creatures that are also going to fill our graveyard. Underrealm Lich also gives us some card selection that can help smooth out our plays over time as well. We should also make mention that we're running all of the fetch lands. These are going to fill our graveyard by virtue of just hitting our land drop. And in the case of enabling Threshold, every little bit is going to help. So what exactly does a Hunting Grounds playstyle afford us? It's not the extent of an Our Turn deck, like my previous video on Smoot Voice of Dissent. Hunting Grounds lets us build an incremental value engine, cheap mana, and leverage some great ETBs to control the ebb and flow of the game. For starters, say our opponent's casting a board wipe. Hunting Grounds trigger is going to go onto the stack, and we could put a card like Guardian of Faith, Luminous Broodmoth, or Avacyn Angel of Hope into play. For 2 and 2 white, Luminous Broodmoth says whenever a creature you control without flying dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. Guardian of Faith is 1 and 2 white for a 3/2 with Vigilance and Flash. When it enters the battlefield, it allows any number of target creatures we control to phase out, an amazing answer to cards like Cyclonic Rift. And Avacyn Angel of Hope is a super cool curve topper that's going to make all of our permanents indestructible, and she is indestructible herself. She's also super great on offense, thanks to being an 8/8 and having Vigilance. Giving us this utility to put protection from removal into play is fantastic, but it's not the only thing that we can do either. Hunting Grounds is going to let us mess with the tempo of the game itself. We can blank haste creatures being cast by putting Urbrask, the most underrated Praetor, into play, causing them to come into play tapped because it's going to resolve first. Plus it's going to give our creatures haste when they enter play. Carter Doomscourge is 2 a red and a black for a 4/3 Demon Berserker. When it enters the battlefield until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. Additionally, whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Carter is Goad on steroids, turning our opponents against each other and putting everyone's shields down for our combat step. Carter's ETB hits the players themselves, so anything new that comes into play will have the effect placed on them. There's no loophole. Hunting Grounds is also just a fantastic source of blatant aggressive mana cheat. We get to put our creatures out on our opponent's turn, so when we untap for our turn, they're able to attack. Plus, cheating a card like Aurelia the War Leader or Smoot Voice of Dissent into play is a surefire way to double down on some aggressive board pressure. There's some pretty expected cards from us though, so let's talk about some low-key sleepers. Quartzwood Crasher is a card that I'm honestly surprised that we don't see more of. They've got the potential to snowball out of control. It's 2/2 red and a green for a 6/6 dinosaur beast with trample. Whenever one or more creatures you control with trample deals combat damage to a player, create an XX green dinosaur beast creature token with trample, where X is the amount of damage those creatures dealt to that player. Getting extra creatures is great enough, but if we've got Garruk's Uprising in play, all of our creatures are going to have trample. It's going to be a lot of big dinosaurs and get out of hand really quickly. Marisi, Breaker of the Coil is another one of those creatures that can get out of hand really quickly, but it doesn't do so proactively. Marisi, Breaker of the Coil is a red, a green, and a white for a 5/4 cat warrior that prevents our opponents from casting spells during combat. So no tricks or no blanking attacks with removal. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, goad each creature that player controls. Until your next turn, those creatures attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. Notice how this is worded differently than Cardor's effect? This hits the creatures themselves rather than their controller. Marisi's also just a fantastic, efficient creature to cast from hand, so there's no need to even worry if Hunting Grounds is online or not. Terror of the Peaks is also going to fill a low-key sleeper role in this deck as well. When we have another creature come into play thanks to Hunting Grounds, Terror is going to deal damage equal to its power to any target. We're not necessarily going to combo off with this card, wink wink, nudge nudge, but we can get some super relevant chip damage that'll add up for free. So we've broken down a few simple things to justify a Hunting Grounds playstyle. How exactly are we going to keep it fueled up? After all, we've got to have creatures in hand to get them into play. As for Sentinel, Mila, Crafty Companion, Mila's Backside, Luca, Wayward Wanderer, Mangara the Diplomat, and Soul of the Harvest are a few awesome sources of creature-based drip draw that are going to help us keep a full hand. We're also going to augment this with non-creature drip draw, like the aforementioned Garruk's Uprising, Guardian Project, and the Great Henge, that are going to draw us cards each time a creature enters play. These cards are absolutely fantastic, even without Hunting Grounds in play, but they get utterly out of hand with it in play. We also get to use card replacements like Eladamri's Call to tutor a creature directly to our hand, and Signal of the Clans is going to do the same thing with some randomness attached, but that's honestly still going to be pretty good because we're getting one of our 3 best creatures to hand. Innistrad Midnight Hunt has given us the perfect engine to pair with Hunting Grounds, and honestly this is part of the reason why I was finally able to make Hunting Grounds work. Liessa Forgotten Archangel is 2 white and a black for a 4/5 angel with flying and lifelink. She reads, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. We also get some redundancy to this effect because of Rien, Angel of Rebirth, who's going to return multicolored creatures to our hand, as well as Athreos, God of Passage. Athreos is easily the least consistent out of these 3, but he's a welcome inclusion since he's only 3 mana and he's indestructible. This trio of cards is going to keep a recursive value engine fueled, turning super great interaction and ramp pieces like Kasali Pridemage, Wood Elves, Sakura Tribe Elder, Ravenous Chupacabra, and even Cardor into amazing removal and value pieces. I actually find it hilarious here that Rien can recur both Liessa and Athreos back to our hand because they're multicolored, and then they in turn can then get Rien back to our hand. We could potentially loop a board state where we drown our opponents out with seemingly infinite threats and incremental value. That value is the perfect way to build us into our top end. With access to 4 colors, we've got access to some of the best curve toppers in the format, so we've got to be pretty selective so that we don't go too overboard. This deck can quickly suffer from too many deck syndrome in that it's just trying to do way too much. So being grounded with our choices is of the utmost importance. Runa's Ultimatum and Rise of the Dark Realms accomplish everything we want to do in a very compact fashion. These curve-topping bombs are 2 of the most powerful spells in all of Magic, and our deck takes advantage of both of them quite well. Runa's Ultimatum is red, white, black for a sorcery that destroys all non-land permanents our opponents control. The one-sided nature of this spell is going to send our opponent's board states packing, and is essentially Marduk's overloaded Cyclonic Rift. It's the perfect setup to swing out in the combat step unopposed, or to just shut the door on value engines. Rise of the Dark Realms, on the other hand, is a one-way ticket to Value Town. It's a sorcery for 7 and 2 black that puts all creatures from all graveyards onto the battlefield under our control. This card is quintessential Commander. It's a big time spell that does big time things. It's sure to give us the board that we need to eliminate some players and give us an opportunity to get a ton of value. It's entirely possible that it's going to turn off Threshold for Hunting Grounds, but at this point, I think we're quite okay with that. It's a small price to pay to put 4 graveyards worth of creatures into play and then get a ton of damage and a ton of value going. If some one-stop bombs weren't enough for you, or they're not your speed, we've packed a combo finish into our deck using Realm Raiser. Realm Raiser is 3 red, green, white for a 4/2 beast that says, when Realm Raiser enters the battlefield, exile all lands. When Realm Raiser leaves the battlefield, return all exiled cards to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control. We can approach this as a Diet Worldgorger Dragon combo that actually has a stopping off point that finishes the game. Realm Raiser is going to ETB and exile our lands. But when we combine it with Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, all of our non-token creatures are also going to be forests, therefore they're going to get exiled too. So Realm Raiser is going to exile all of our creatures, including itself, thus triggering its second bit of text to return everything into play. This is going to loop infinitely, sending everything in and out of play tapped. So where are we going with this? Right now we've got a never-ending loop with no outlet. The game is a literal indefinite draw that no one can interact with. This is where Terror of the Peaks or Purphoros God of the Forge comes in. Terror or Purphoros are going to be able to close the loop in a sense that they provide the burn necessary to eliminate our opponents. Terror of the Peaks is going to deal damage equal to each creature's power to any target, and Purphoros is going to burn each opponent's face for 2 damage each time a creature enters the battlefield under our control. Both of these burn-based outlets are definitely going to get you over the finish line in style. And I'm going to reiterate this again. Make sure you have a damage outlet when pulling off this combo, because if you don't, the game ends in an unstoppable tie. It's hilarious, but it's definitely not what we want to see. I'm always going to be a huge fan of these quirky build-around cards that force you to think creatively when you're brewing. Cards like Wild Pair, Rooftop Storm, and Hunting Grounds are the sorts of cards that make me fall in love with Commander over and over again, and absolutely bring out the creative side of players when pushing the limits of what can be done in the format. That's it for this Deck Tech. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thought of a card that you think should be included, or have a commander you'd like to see me brew or break down? Tell me in the comments below. Also, let me know if there's a favorite build-around card that you have, or a build-around card that you've been trying to make work but are struggling with. You might see it in a future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, ding the bell icon, and help me fight the evil algorithm overlords and the control players by liking this video and leaving a comment. I'll catch you next time.